Hello and welcome to this video in our Super Telephoto Masterclass series. This one is all about architecture. I'm going to share a range of tips and techniques that you can use to get the most out of your Super Telephoto lens in urban environments. Tip number one is get used to the focal length. Look further afield for different subjects and keep your head on a swivel. When you first start shooting with the Super Telephoto lens, it can take time to get used to just how much closer it brings everything. If you're used to shooting with an iPhone's 2, 3 or even 5 times telephoto camera, then it will feel like a big leap, and it can change the way you look for potential subjects and compositions. Take this scene, for example. With my eyes and my iPhone 15 Pro Max's 1x camera, I saw a wide shot of the River Thames, but the Super Telephoto lens saw the London Eye framed between two buildings. Next, I'm going to show you multiple techniques you can use to create images with depth. Depth is essential with Super Telephoto architecture photography because of the lens's extensive compression. Compression flattens your scene, which is why in this example, the shard looks like it's looming right behind these buildings when it's actually 600 meters away. This amount of compression can help you create some striking compositions, but it can also make certain subjects feel flat and lifeless. So let's explore how to take advantage of compression instead of having it work against you. This first technique is the opposite of that first one I just shared with you, and it is focus on smaller sections within buildings, specifically those with interesting lines, colours and shapes within their design. Take these buildings in Manchester, for example. At first glance, they might not seem like obvious subjects for the Super Telephoto lens, especially when you're standing this close. But by isolating their lines, shapes and colours, you can create abstract images that are both engaging and unique. And notice how none of these shots were taken straight on. Instead, they're all angled so that their surfaces lead away from the camera, creating that all-important depth and making the images feel more dynamic. Another technique is to shoot into a corner where lines lead from the outer edges and converge in the middle. You can go for symmetry here, or you can have the lines converge on a point on the rule of thirds. And these types of shots are most effective, and the structure will look more 3D when the sun is lighting up one side more than the other. It can still work with flat lighting, but it's not as effective. And speaking of not as effective, here are some examples of where these techniques just straight up didn't work. This is the walkie-talkie building in London, and there's just too much going on across the frame. These types of shots definitely work best with simple shapes and clean lines. That said though, these shots do give me an opportunity to demonstrate the G-Series CPL filter cutting reflections from glass. For tip number 3, let's talk about using the foreground and other surrounding elements. These are two powerful framing techniques that layer your composition to guide your viewer's eye to your subject, while adding depth and visual interest to make your photos feel more dynamic and immersive. These contextual layers not only help make your Super Telephoto images more visually compelling on their own, but it also helps tie them together as part of a broader photo story. Here, the Super Telephoto lens allowed me to capture the details of this statue, but the composition isn't particularly interesting or engaging. So I looked around and I noticed a small plant outside a nearby cafe. And by shooting through the leaves, we now have a much more interesting composition. This new angle of the statue looking into the frame gives it a more human presence. The dark outer focus leaves framing the lighter subject add depth, contrast and a sense of intimacy. Plus, the leaves naturally guide the eye to the statue's face, creating a more immersive and organic feel to the image. But foreground elements don't always have to be this close to the camera. When you're in cities, you can often use other buildings that naturally become part of the composition. In this shot, the shard is framed by the buildings on either side of this narrow street, and the way it fills this gap gives you a sense of its sheer size. And this is the kind of shot that works perfectly as part of a photo series, especially when it's paired with this water reflection shot. Here, I used this reflection to create two different types of foreground frames within the same shot, and the way that only part of the building is visible and framed by multiple layers creates a sense of intrigue and ultimately builds anticipation for that big wide reveal shot. And one more frame/reflection example. I don't think this is the best image, but it gives you a good creative idea, and it relates back to tip number 1 about the importance of looking around more and approaching things differently with the Super Telephoto lens. You should be able to apply these Super Telephoto architecture tips and techniques to a wide variety of places around the world and capture some interesting and engaging architecture images. And when you do, don't forget to share them in the Reeflex Piazza Facebook group. So thanks for watching, and don't forget to check out the other videos in this masterclass series.